Okay. Well, good evening, everyone, and I'd like to call to order our special council meeting for Thursday, June 25th. And I'd like to ask for, is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we do have obviously no in-camera session, but we do have to move into the public meeting forum. And I have a motion that would read that the Council of Township of Lucan-Biddulph adjourn its regular meeting at 6 minutes after 6 in order to convene a public meeting under Section 34 and 17 of the Planning Act RSO 1990 as amended. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Westman and Councillor Regan. And all opposed. And that is carried. Thank you very much. So we do have to hear planner's report with regards to an application for an official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment. And just before I hand it over to our planner for that, I just kind of want to go over the format for everyone and just kind of refresh council's memory from what we went through last week during our last public planning meeting. So how it's going to work is Dan Fitzgerald, our planner, will deliver his report to us. We will see if there's been any more submissions received since the agenda has been posted. At that point, the applicant will be able to speak and make any comment further to the report. And then I will open it up to council for council questions. And then at that point, the public will have the opportunity to make comments with regards to this application. And for council, we're actually going to do it slightly different than we did last week. If you remember last week, we used the Q&A format. This week, I have, we talked about it with Dan amongst staff, going on the way some other council meetings have been held. And I have a list of all of the people who have registered, and I can see them in attendance. And what we will do is I will ask each one of them, and they'll be unmuted at that point, if they have any comment to make. And I think that that will flow a little bit easier than having to go back and forth between the Q&A and chat functions of Zoom. So once again, registered and attending, you will all get be given the opportunity to make comment. And of course, if you don't wish to make a comment, or if your thoughts have been made numerous times, you can just add that too, and you can reflect that no, you don't want to make a comment or whatnot. So as the meeting goes on, I'll remind everybody of the protocols and the flow of it. And once again, I just want to remind everybody that this is a public meeting, this is a public process, but just to kindly ask everybody to remain professional and in the way that questions are being asked and the way you're conducting those conversations. And with that, I will turn it over to our planner, Dan Fitzgerald. And as I said, what we're hearing is an application for an official plan amendment, and it is OPA-1-2020, and a zoning bylaw amendment, ZBA-2-2020. And this, the owner applicants are Walter Anton Locke and Zelinka Priamo Limited, and of course it's with regards to 280 Main Street in Lucan. With that, Dan, I will hand it over to you to walk us through your report.
Thank you, member, and to all members of council. My name is Dan Fitzgerald, and I am the planner for Lucan-Biddulph. I'm just going to share my screen. Oh, I guess I can't share my screen. there we go. Okay. So that everyone can see what we're talking about here.
Great.
Here we go. So the subject property is a 2.18 acre parcel situated on the west end of Lucan, also on the north side of Main Street or Highway 4. More specifically, the site is directly west of the township office and library. Existing land uses surrounding the property include a commercial building to the west, vacant land to the north, the township office and library to the east, and agricultural as well as commercial uses to the south. The subject land contains two separate parcels as shown here on the location map. As noted in the planning report, the rear portion of the lands, or the north parcel, is a flag-shaped vacant piece of land. It has a frontage of approximately 18 meters along Main Street and is approximately 1.47 acres or 0.6 of a hectare in area. Access to the property is provided through Main Street along the east boundary. The lands are predominantly designated residential in the township official plan, with the exception of a portion of the front half being designated highway commercial. Additionally, the lands are zoned a site-specific highway commercial exception C2-6 zone in the zoning bylaw, which permits both residential as well as automotive-centric uses. The second parcel of lands contains an existing commercial building currently supporting predominantly professional office uses. This parcel of land has a frontage of approximately 50.39 meters along Main Street in an area of approximately 0.71 of an acre or 0.29 of a hectare. Access to this property is provided again through Main Street. The lands are designated highway commercial in the township official plan and zoned a site-specific highway commercial exception C25 zone in the township zoning bylaw. This predominantly includes professional office uses as well as auto-centric uses in the highway commercial zone. The subject properties as a whole are within the settlement area of Lucan and are generally serviceable. The applicant is seeking a site-specific zoning amendment as well as a site-specific official plan amendment for the purpose of constructing a 4 to 6 story mixed-use apartment building with commercial units on the first floor fronting onto Main Street. As conceptually designed, the apartment building would contain 114 residential units comprised of 72 one-bedroom and 42 two-bedroom units. 2 separate access points are proposed to Main Street, and a total of 146 at-grade parking stalls are shown. Further, the proposal includes approximately 12.5% soft landscaping around the perimeter of the lot and provides outdoor patios or balconies with each unit, and also offers a common outdoor amenity space above the 4th and 5th floors. As noted, the rear portion of the lands is designated residential in the township official plan, and the front portion of the site highway commercial, which does not permit residential uses. As such, the developer is seeking to establish a special policy area in the township official plan to permit residential uses in the highway commercial designation as shown in the attachment here. The draft official plan amendment can also be found as an attachment to the planning information report. Additionally, as shown here, the developer is seeking to establish a single site-specific consolidated highway commercial exception zone from the 2 existing site-specific highway commercial exception zones, being the C25 and C26 zone previously discussed. The proposed zoning would permit the establishment of the following uses across the entire property: apartment buildings, clinics, multi-unit dwellings, nursing homes, office general and professional, townhouse dwelling, and all other uses in the C2 zone, which are predominantly automotive centric. Additionally, the developer is seeking relaxations from the bylaw for the following standards: reduction in the minimum front yard setback from 56 meters currently to 22 meters, an increase in the maximum height from 10 meters to 25 meters, and a reduction in the number of required parking stalls from 1.5 stalls per residential unit to 1.2 stalls per residential unit, and for a reduction from 1 per 15 meters squared net floor area for a clinic use to 1 per 30 meters squared net floor area for a clinic use. Planning staff have reviewed the proposal against the provincial policy statement, the County Middlesex official plan, as well as the Township of Lucan-Biddulph official plan. Several policies have been identified in the planning report, which will be utilized to prepare a recommendation for council. Generally speaking, the PPS, the county official plan, and local official plan all state that development shall be focused in the existing settlement area and promote appropriate mixes of density and housing types beyond low-density single detached dwellings. More specifically, section 1.1.1 of the PPS speaks to establishing and promoting healthy, livable, and safe communities by promoting efficient development and land use patterns, accommodating an appropriate, affordable, and a market-based range and mix of residential and employment types, as well as promoting the integration of land use planning, growth management, intensification, and infrastructure planning to minimize land consumption and servicing costs. Additionally, section 1.1.3.4 states appropriate development standards should be promoted, which facilitate intensification, redevelopment, in compact form that avoids and mitigates risks to public health and safety, while section 1.1.3.6 further clarifies that new development taking place in designated growth areas should occur adjacent to the existing built-up area and should have a compact form, mix of uses and densities that allow for the efficient use of land, infrastructure, and public service facilities. Section 1.3.1 of the PPS directs municipalities to promote economic development and competitiveness by providing for an appropriate mix and range of employment, institutional, and broader mixed uses to meet long-term economic needs. It also speaks to encouraging compact mixed-use development that incorporates compatible employment uses to support livable and resilient communities. Further, section 1.4 of the PPS speaks to housing and the requirements to provide a range and mix of housing options and densities required to meet projected requirements in for current and future residents. Lastly, section 1.7.1 speaks to the long-term economic prosperity, encouraging residential uses to respond to the dynamic market-based needs, as well as providing necessary housing supply and range of housing options for a diverse workforce. Likewise, the county official plan identifies housing policies and provides general directions. More specifically, section 2.3.1 encourages a wide range of housing types, sizes, and tenures to meet projected demographic and market requirements, while also promoting intensification and redevelopment to occur in settlement areas where appropriate levels of physical services are available. The Township Official Plan provides more specific policies related to achieving growth and intensification. As previously noted, the subject lands are split designated residential and highway commercial. The residential designation in the Township Official Plan, found in section 2.1.5, directs the majority of population growth to occur in the Township of Lucan, the Village of Lucan. Section 2.1.5.1 and 2.1.5.2 discuss the potential for residential development, noting primarily single detached dwellings. However, direction is provided to include low-rise and small-scale apartment buildings where the scale, density, and form of development respects and is sensitive to the small town character of the village. Further, it clarifies that height and density of development will be limited to ensure compatibility. Additionally, section 2.1.5.5 speaks to medium density developments in the form of apartments being encouraged to locate where direct and proximate access to arterial or collector roads is available, where they are close to commercial areas, schools, and parks, and where municipal services are available. Further, section 2.1.5.11 provides guidance for intensification and redevelopment in Lucan. Subsection C states that residential intensification and redevelopment may only occur to a maximum density which maintains the minimum lot areas permitted in the zoning bylaw and or is deemed suitable by the township to satisfy the proposed water supply and wastewater disposal systems. Notice of the application was circulated to agencies as well as property owners in accordance with the Planning Act requirements. Several letters have been received and included with the planning information report. Additional responses have been received after completion of the report and will be included as part of the public record. Generally speaking, the comments are specific to the following themes. There's concerns regarding the proposed height and density of the development, and no other developments being of this size and density within the existing village. There's concerns regarding the loss of views, concerns regarding the existing soft services being able to accommodate a potential increase in population such as grocery stores, arenas, parks, as well as community services and schools. We received concerns regarding the existing services such as fire and ambulance and whether they would be able to adapt to service a building of this size. Potential impacts of parking on neighborhoods due to proposed reductions of on-site parking. There's also concerns about limited amount of landscape outdoor amenity space, as well as tenant occupying units as opposed to owners. There has been concerns raised about the impacts of vehicular traffic and noise, as well as a loss of privacy in general. There's been concerns about the negative impacts of property value, impacts of shadows in the existing neighborhoods, as well as concerns about the existing infrastructure being able to accommodate the proposed growth. We've also received concerns regarding what will happen with existing tenants in the commercial building, as well as the loss, more of a larger theme in most letters received was the loss of the small town character valued by residents. So given the above, staff recommend that council receives the planning report as information. I'm here to answer questions.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Dan. At this point, I would like to ask the applicants, or I guess Tina, that's right, written submissions. I know we received a number of them. Did you want to speak to those?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. We did receive further written submissions from Abby Barron, Alyssa Mosinger, Tara Kleischt, Nick Barron, and Andy Matt.
Okay, thank you very much. And with that, I will ask the applicants if they wish to say anything. Did we know ahead of time who was going to speak on behalf of the application, if anybody was? Ron?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I believe I will go to Harry, and I'm going to butcher his last name, Harry F. I'll just call him Harry F. And I'll bring him on board right now and let him talk. Harry, can you hear us?
Just have to.
Yes, I can, Ron.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, Harry, at this time, is there anything that you would like to add for comment?
Yes, Madam Mayor, just briefly, I would like to go over some of the known concerns that we've seen through the public process. But first of all, I just want to thank council and staff for your efforts in processing this application and conducting the public meeting during some very challenging times and under some very different circumstances. It's just great to see that things are finally moving forward again. As was noted, we are the agents for Walter Anton Locke, who is the owner of the property, and Copia Developments, who are the potential developer of this site and future owner of the property, to develop a mixed-use building consisting of ground floor commercial uses and residential dwelling units on that 280 Main Street in Lucan. Mr. Fitzgerald gave a very good overview of the proposal as it stands right now. So I will just go right into the issues that we sort of see that have arisen out of the process, and then I'll leave it to some dialogue between council and the public to see if we can address any of the concerns. And I also believe that John Knifton, who represents Copia, will also be giving some submissions as well based on the proposed development. So as you've heard, the official plan and zoning amendment application seeks to permit residential uses across the entire property, as well as site-specific regulations for height and parking. And as Mr. Fitzgerald noted, that it's important to note that the rear portion of the property already permits apartment dwellings at a maximum height of 10 meters. The current setback requirement of 56 meters for apartment dwellings is to recognize that residential uses are not permitted within the front portion of the property, which is designated highway commercial. So the requested setback of 22 meters for an apartment dwelling is to ensure that the spirit and intent of the highway commercial designation is maintained by positioning the commercial uses so that they directly face Main Street with residential uses in behind on the ground floor. So that hopefully clarifies why the setback is required for the apartment dwelling. Now, one of the main concerns that we've seen through the public comments is the requested height being 25 meters, which would allow for a building ranging between 4 to 6 stories on the property. We do acknowledge that the proposed height is taller than what currently exists in the community. However, in my opinion, I believe that additional height in the form of taller buildings can be appropriate in circumstances where potential impacts on existing surrounding uses can be minimized or mitigated. The subject lands are an appropriate site to consider increased height due to their location along a major road at the west end of the community that can also accommodate increased traffic. It is at the terminus of the residential designation based on the land use plan in the official plan. So it is at the furthest point away from the majority of existing low density residential areas to the north, to the east, and to the south. It's surrounded primarily by commercial, recreational, and institutional uses, which actually would be a benefit to the residents of the proposed building, and in turn would make more efficient use of those existing uses as well. The proposed building respects and actually goes beyond the minimum side yard and rear yard requirements, thus increasing separation from abutting uses and providing minimal, if any, privacy and overlook concerns. And we also understand and appreciate concerns raised by the residents along Walnut Street regarding shadowing impacts. We did provide a shadow study together with the application that shows the extent of any shadowing during the spring, summer, and fall equinox. The purpose of any shadow study is to ensure that proposed developments do not impact the use of private residential amenity space during the spring, summer, and fall. Standard criteria is that there should be no shadow impact for more than 2 consecutive hourly test times. And our shadow study shows that the most impact is on March 21st and September 21st in the evening around 6 o'clock, which is generally when the sun is starting to set. During the summer months, there are no shadowing impacts on anticipated on these residential uses to the north. But notwithstanding, we do understand the concerns, and we will take a closer look at this to make sure that the shadow impacts are minimized, if any, as much as possible and in accordance with the standard criteria. And just in closing on the height aspect, and as Dan mentioned, the PPS requires the settlement areas grow and intensify within their existing boundaries, and also provide a wide range and mix of housing to support the needs of all of its residents. This proposed development provides an opportunity to offer a mix of housing opportunities within the community that will be available to a wider range of households and incomes, and will also make more efficient use of existing services and infrastructure. So in my opinion, the height, the range between 4 to 6 stories and the way it's designed on the property is appropriate. It does address land use compatibility issues, and we will further investigate that through more detailed investigation of the shadowing through the site plan process. So in my opinion, as I said, and what you see in our planning report is that the proposed height in this situation and in this property is appropriate. One of the other aspects that was a bit of concern was the parking rate that we're proposing, which is 1.2 spaces per unit. In this instance, we believe it's justified because the owner will be assigning parking spaces to each unit through the rental agreements. And for instance, what we're looking at doing is assigning 1 parking space for each 1-bedroom unit and a minimum of 1 space for each 2-bedroom unit, with additional spaces being made available and assigned on a first come, first served basis. And these parking spaces will be signed accordingly on the property. A minimum of 8 visitor spaces are going to be specifically signed for that purpose. We are not proposing any changes to the commercial parking other than the rate for a clinic to be consistent with the rate for the existing office uses. And as the commercial spaces are intended to be occupied by the existing office tenants, they will be, obviously they will be invited to come back into the new building. Based on that, there is an opportunity for additional parking spaces to be available for visitors during after hours if necessary. The other concerns that were identified relate to the provision of a landscaped open space and servicing capacity. With respect to the landscape open space, we are proposing to incorporate landscape strips along the entire perimeter of the property. Amenity space for the tenants will be provided in the form of patios for each unit on the ground floor and private balconies for each of the units in the upper stories. In addition, there is a rooftop terrace proposed on a portion of the 4th and 5th stories for the benefit of the residents. This area will be shielded from the abutting lands to the north and to the east by the 6th story. And I do note that the current C6 zone, which permits the apartment dwellings on the site currently, it does not require a minimum outdoor amenity area, but there is something at least proposed on this site in the form of the rooftop and the rooftop areas and the balconies. And further to that, the proposed development will be situated near existing recreational and open space areas, which can be utilized by the tenants of the building in lieu of at-grade amenity space. With respect to servicing, we have reviewed the comments from staff, and we expect that these matters will be dealt with more closely at the site plan approval stage. Based on that, Madam Mayor, that is basically what I was hoping to get across this evening. I will let Mr. Knifton speak as well, but I do ask to be able to reply to any other comments that may come forward that may be of assistance.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just going to actually ask you if you just wanted to stay on, so
Yes.
you're comfortable with if there needs any clarification with staying on then.
That's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I see that Lisa has promoted John Knifton to be able to speak. So Mr. Knifton, is there any comments that you would like to add at this moment, at this time?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Actually, my name is pronounced Knifton.
Knifton.
Okay, it's silent. That's okay. So yeah, I appreciate your time, Madam Mayor and Council. My name is John Knifton, and I represent the developer for the project, Copia Developments, and I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak. I want to comment briefly on some of the public comments that we received from the community concerning our proposed project. Certainly, the underlying theme from the feedback would seem to be around the fact that some of the residents of Lucan live in the community because they enjoy the quaint small town village feel of living in Lucan. And we certainly recognize this, and it's one of the reasons that attracted our company to invest in Lucan, because we also recognize that the small town fabric of Lucan is a special place, and it's attractive and inviting to existing and possible new residents that might be considering moving to Lucan. We see Lucan as a market for smart growth. We believe the project has the potential to accommodate an existing demographic whom currently live in the surrounding area, such as existing local residents or retired persons, and maybe farmers who want to sell their current businesses and residents. And we also believe that we can attract young urban professionals that may not necessarily have the means to afford or even want to buy a house, but they are attracted to the community because of its convenient location and its small town charm. We also recognize that Lucan currently does not have an abundance of new rental units, and we believe there's a void in the market to attract both existing and new residents, to Lucan for the project. I would like to quantify one thing about our project, that it is not a high-rise development, as a high-rise development is typically identified with a tower or multi-story building with underground parking and other attributes for a more urban type project found in larger municipalities such as London. We are more of a small to mid-rise building. So we do appreciate the small town feel of Lucan, and we also appreciate Lucan's very good location in close proximity to London, and other surrounding communities. Our goal is to offer existing and future residents the small town charm of Lucan in a new mixed-use rental development environment that currently we feel does not exist in the township. What has attracted us to Lucan is the fact that we believe there's an existing demand within the market for rental mixed-use units, and we would very respectively like to fulfill this need within the community to improve the housing opportunities and housing stock in the community with as little disruption as possible to the community, which is part of the reason why we're here tonight. Other comments that we saw that have been addressed by Dan are on possible negative economic impact or the loss of Dr. Viguera's practice and the impact on infrastructure services such as daycare and so on, which I'm just going to quickly say about economic spin-offs. We believe our project will create a positive economic benefit to Lucan. Firstly, to address the loss of Dr. Viguera's practice, we've spoken to the doctor and we are in the process right now of creating a relocation plan for Dr. Viguera's practice to be relocated into our new commercial space in the new project. We also have potential space in the project to accommodate a new daycare facility if required. And I'd like to also point out that our project is going to generate up to $275,000 in development charges and a corresponding significant amount of property taxes from the new development. We strongly believe that our location will greatly enhance the existing businesses on Main Street, as we believe our future residents will make the 5-minute walk south to access the many stores that are located so close by. We also believe that our project may spur more economic development in the form of new businesses, such as restaurants, retail stores, and other enterprises possibly opening up downtown on Main Street. We also feel that our project could foster future economic growth if the community was interested to head in that direction. I'd point to a project that we currently have under development in the town of Exeter. Exeter has a very strong manufacturing base located in the north end of Exeter in the small industrial M zone. Exeter is currently in an interesting situation whereby it has more jobs available in skilled labor and professional type jobs than it does have qualified people in Exeter to fill those jobs. Exeter has what is called negative unemployment, which is a unique problem, having more jobs than there are residents to fill those jobs. So the town of Exeter, including the mayor, council, and the CAO, strongly believe that one of the main reasons this problem exists is because Exeter has a shortage of rental mixed-use units. They see mixed-use rental units as being critical to the housing supply in Exeter in order to accommodate young and older residents to fill the jobs that exist in the market, because a lot of people choose not to purchase or not able to purchase a house, but they want to move to the community to go to work, save their money, and then eventually buy a home in the community. So in the case of Lucan, we want to develop a building that embraces and underscores the small town fabric of Lucan. We want to blend in as opposed to stand out while delivering a rental mixed-use project and units to the market. Finally, I would say, as a company, we're not at all interested in having a fight or putting up a huge disagreement with the municipality or with the community, and certainly with council, because that's just not the way we do business. We want to work with the township and the community to develop a project that is in keeping with Lucan's historic past and its exciting future. Thank you. That's it. If there's any questions, I'm pleased to answer them.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Nifton. Okay, if there aren't any more from the applicant at this time, I will open it up for discussion from council. Any comments, questions? Councillor Regan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions and a couple of comments. So you mentioned 1 and 2 bedroom apartments. I'm just wondering, 1 or 2 bedroom apartments, why not 3? Have you done a demographic study that actually, because you talked about people who are living in Lucan now being able to access these units. So I don't know if you've done a demographic study saying, we have families, or are they just single people, or, and I don't know, that's why I'm asking. So that's sort of my first question. And if you have that, can you give us the results of that? I mean, if you're building one and two bedroom apartments, and we have families with, of 3 or 4 or 5, 1 and 2 bedroom apartments isn't going to work. The other question I have is that if you have 114 units and 146 parking spots, I hope I'm right, people have cars, and I'm just wondering what happens if you rent those units out and there's 228 cars that you got to deal with, and we got 146 parking spots. I'm kind of concerned about that. And the other question I have is, I'm looking at a picture of the building. Is that the building we get? Thank you.
If I may, I will leave the first question to Mr. Nifton, but I will speak to the last 2 points. As I stated in my presentation, the parking spaces will be assigned in the various rental agreements. There will be only 1 parking space assigned for each of the 1-bedroom units. A minimum of 1 space will be assigned to the 2-bedroom units, but there will be some surplus that could be assigned on a first come, first served basis. They won't be allowed to bring in more than those parking spaces they are assigned to their unit. So there will be some control on the parking spaces in order to ensure that we have visitor spaces and we have the sufficient amount of spaces for the commercial units as well. So I hope that answers the question regarding the parking. With respect to the building, I mean, this is the concept that we have right now, and this is what we've proposed as part of the zoning amendment. And this is what's envisioned to be built on the property based on what feedback we get tonight from council and from the public.
Okay, Mr. Nifton, do you want to answer Councillor Regan's other question with regards, I think it was to the demographic study?
Yes, we have not performed specifically, Councillor Regan, a demographic study, and we are very open to 3-bedroom units or 2-bedroom units or 1-bedroom units, and determining the right mix of units within the building is going to be done over the process of time. We may employ a consultant to help us determine what is going to be the highest and best mixture of units on the site. And if we found halfway through the design process that there was a great demand for 3-bedroom units in the market, although I would say in my experience 3-bedroom units are fairly rare, but certainly we'd be amenable to changing the interior programming of our building in order to accommodate more 3-bedroom units or more 2-bedroom units and less 1-bedroom units if that was the case. And if we had to lose units overall in the building and reduce it from 114 down to something less, that would be fine as well.
Could you have follow up to that, Councillor Regan?
I do. I just have one other follow up, and I think it's for Mr. Fitzgerald, if I could. So I'm looking through the maps and the diagrams I have, and my concern is about access for those, I think, 228 cars onto Main Street. And I can't really see where the access points are for traffic on it. You're moving those cars every day. So I'm maybe it's just me not being able to read the map, but I'm just not sure where all that access. That's a lot of traffic.
The chair to Councillor Regan, but if it may be helpful if I maybe share my screen and pull up the site plan.
Thank you.
So as proposed on the conceptual site plan, the bottom down here, can you see is my cursor?
I can, yes, I can, thank you.
So the access proposed is down here, so the south side of the site, which is adjacent to Main Street. So there's 2 access points proposed, one on the east side of the site and one on the west, again at the southern boundary, which is the front of the property facing Main Street. And they've proposed basically a drive aisle that comes all the way around the building and then back out the other side.
All right. Okay. Okay, thank you. Just questions and concerns. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that. Oh. Okay, any other comments from council at this time? Deputy Mayor Manders.
Yeah, I got a few different comments. What about if there's, how do you determine, I guess this is maybe for Dan and the applicant, how do we determine and who determines that there needs to be a turning lane put in with the density if approved, and who pays for that? The only thing I've ever seen and kind of in the areas that I travel is, I know here in Tractor had to put one in, and I believe they had to pay for that and then put a turning lane in up towards Exeter. And that would be a concern of mine. Just curious on that.
Through the chair to Councilor Manders. So through the more detailed site plan analysis and application process, we would require a traffic impact assessment, which would identify whether or not turning lanes off of Main Street would be required. So in this case, it would be left-hand turning lanes for this end of the property. So any improvements that are required to the municipal right-of-way would be something that the developer would have to pay for through an offsite development agreement.
Okay. And the height is a concern of mine. The height is a concern of mine because, again, we can't, I don't know how we can control conceptual drawings as opposed to the consequence of our decision and the impact of our community on that. And that's very concerning. And that height, I know the applicants, saying 4 to 6 stories, but at that 24-meter height at 8-foot ceilings, traditional building, apartment building, flat rooftop, that would be an 8-story building. Could be if the property was resold after, things didn't work out or for whatever reason. And again, my concern is again, we've got the consequences of this height throughout our community as opposed to that site specific. And that's a concern of mine. I guess don't really have a comment, but I guess I don't really need that. That's just a concern. Okay. The other thing is too, the parking has always been a concern of mine since day one on council, with us having no public transit and we're a drive-to community at everything we do, and especially that site. I mean, you've got to drive to everything, so it would be a concern of mine reducing the parking spaces. And yeah, that's kind of all the comments I got for now.
Okay, thanks for that, Dave. Any other comments from council? Councillor Masterakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. More comment. We're talking about shadow studies, traffic impact studies. Are there other studies that go along with a process for mid-size apartment buildings that we should look for, we should expect to help in the process and help the residents? Because some of the questions we're getting are fire related. Can the volunteer fire departments handle this? What's the traffic flow, sewage treatment, all those pieces? Is there reporting that or an analysis that could come forward that addresses those questions for the residents and council as we go through the process?
Okay, I don't know if that's a question for you, Dan. You might know of other planning studies that could be done.
Yeah, through the chair, I can speak to kind of generalities and then how you would work from your zoning stage and official plan stage to a more detailed site plan approval stage. So at the conceptual stage, we're really just looking at can the proposed development feasibly be serviced in a way that the density that you're giving the ability to build is possible on the lands. So what we're talking about is more higher level servicing analysis that would basically state there's existing capacity within the system that would be able to support this development. So general studies that we do look for more towards, well, for now would be those general higher end overview studies that would kind of give you comfort in knowing that this development, if approved, is serviceable first, given the number of units that are shown, which is a big one for us. And then that, water capacity is existing on the property and would not cause undue hardship to the existing system, as well as stormwater capacity and where is that going to go. So those are kind of the higher level things that we look at when it comes to the zoning and official plan amendment process. And then when you step into a more detailed site plan analysis, that's when you get into the more detailed reports that say how these things are actually going to occur on the property, and then allocating capacity to the development through the actual approval.
Does that answer your question, Councilor Mastarakis?
Yeah, it does. I didn't know if as a municipality, we had anything in regards to, the fire and rescue side or areas outside of the sewage, water treatment, stormwater. That's been a question I've heard in the community, plus through the emails. Can our community handle this size of apartment building, number of units, if there is a fire issue? Is there a study that comes forward, a report, or is that something down the road as well, or is that sooner than later?
And you're looking for specifics if our department is able to manage an emergency fire at a building that size?
Right. Do we have protocols in place now? Or I don't know what the differences are. I know there was an email from a London firefighter that brought some concerns that there may not be the capacity ability with the volunteer fire stations in the area. I don't know. Is there information we can get on that just to verify for the resident, for ourselves?
So I can tell you that I've spoken directly with Chief DeBrouwer, and he believes that with today's building codes, with progresses that have been made with that they can fight the fire. I'm not going to speak to it technically. Maybe Ron can add more because he was part of that conversation. But like anything, if there is a large emergency in our community, we are fortunate enough to have two departments, and so in the event of a large event, the Granton Fire Department would certainly come as assistance, as well as we do have agreements with our neighbors. But we can certainly ask Chief DeBrouwer to perhaps submit something to council that can go into the technical end of it that obviously I can't speak to. But Ron, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just maybe a couple additional comments. So the initial application was reviewed by both the chief and the chair of the fire board, Mr. Dave Goddard. He's very knowledgeable in these areas, and both felt comfortable in not opposing it. They have not submitted a formal report yet. That would not likely come until they actually get some building plans in front of them. But the building code has sufficiently changed, and it has. There are sufficient built-in protections once you get over a certain level. We talk about, built-in sprinklers, there's fire separation requirements, things like that. So at this point, the building code will cover off those kinds of issues. And really the City of London has many high-rise apartments where their existing ladder trucks cannot reach. There's ways to protect people in those buildings, and it's built right into the building code. So again, that's further down the road, but anyway, hope that answers a bit. Yeah.
Did you have any further follow-up or anything, Councillor Mastarakis? At this time? Okay, no, thank you. Any other comments from council? Councillor Westman.
Yeah, I share the concern about parking. It's fine to say that we're going to have rules in place, and part of the rental agreement it says this or that, but people are going to do what people are going to do, and you know, they're going to have visitors, and there's going to be overflow into the neighboring properties, and the last thing I want to see is us having to tow vehicles away or issue tickets and things like that when we can fix that before we even start. So I got to say the parking is going to be a big deal for me. And the height of the building, I mean, we're struggling already with other proposals with the height of construction. So it's not going to be an easy call, not at all. So.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Westman. Everybody's had a opportunity to speak right now. I guess I just have a couple questions for the applicants. You know, you had a public meeting back in December, and I know it was a different artist rendering that you were proposing then. And I guess my question would be, how did you go from what was presented at that public meeting to what we're looking at tonight? There's no question what we're looking at tonight is spectacular. And I believe I was in a meeting with you, and I said, if that building was in Lucan, I feel like we were all growing up. But I'd like the thought process as to going from what was presented to what you're presenting tonight. If I don't know which one, if Mr. Nifton or Harry wants to take that.
Harry, I'll let you take that.
Okay, well, I think primarily there was just revisiting sort of some of the issues with the existing building, whether or not to retain that or incorporate it into the new building, trying to maximize the amount of units that we could get on the property, knowing there was a demand for it, and then also making the building a little more compact to get the minimum side yard, rear yard requirements. Because if you recall with the previous plan, that building was up very tight against the property lines. And it wasn't as effective as efficient in terms of circulation, parking, and all that. So that we just looked at a different sort of approach in terms of combining everything under one building, making it more compact, albeit a little bit higher, 1 story higher now, because it is more compact to accommodate the number of units that we're proposing, but to give a little bit more space to allow for the parking to be accommodated as well. So we think this is a much better proposal that achieves a lot more of the zoning regulations that are already in place.
And we also had to do a redesign of the site plan because if you'll recall, when we did the public meeting, I believe our access was off of Butler Street, right, to the east.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that correct, Harry? We did change that.
Well, I guess it would be the north, yeah.
Well, I guess it's the north, yes, pardon me.
The north.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was off of Butler, yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I guess the other concern is like, first of all, Dan Fitzgerald, from a capacity standpoint, refresh, or maybe even maybe Jeff Little can answer this question. From a capacity standpoint for sewage treatment, is it one, it's based on flows, like one unit isn't the same as one house. You don't gauge it that way. But what sort of capacity at the sewage treatment plant would that take up?
Good evening, Madam Mayor. So through some of the initial information brought forward to us, it looks like about 40 cubic meters a day would end up being processed through this development, which would be about 40 homes, equivalent to about 40 homes. You know, if we were going to look at a subdivision and that sort of thing. So there is a different calculation for apartment buildings depending on a single bedroom, 2-bedroom, and then there's also a different calculation for commercial. So we do have those numbers. There is capacity at the plant for this. There's capacity in the pipe at Butler. There's a little bit more to work out on some of the flows that are coming on to Butler to make sure everything kind of meets our meets the capacity, but for the sanitary, we're looking at, we can meet the needs of this building.
Okay, thank you for that. What else do I have right now? You know, I guess my concerns are much the same as what you've heard from my colleagues. I am concerned about the amount of parking. And to the deputy mayor's point, you know, we are a community that you have to drive to, and you have to drive it in, you know, 9 out of 10 cases, you have to drive somewhere to go to work. And while, you know, there's a good chance that the demographic that might be interested in this type of building would be retired. We can't be certain of that. So the parking is a concern, and the height. I certainly like the concept of the building. I don't have a problem with the official plan change in extending onto what would be Dr. Locke's property, I believe. I'm just kind of looking for a nod of the head, Dan, if I've got this right, so that it can incorporate residential, because it does not have that designation right now. So that's what the official plan amendment would address, correct? Okay, so I've got that straight. So I'm very supportive of that. I think that makes sense on that site to extend that. But the height as it is, that one is, it's very daunting to me. You know, it's almost 3 times the size of what we're you know, zoning, or what we're allowed, and that has to be taken into consideration. So that's kind of where my head is at the moment. And I'm sure as we hear more comments from the public, we'll be getting more comments from council. I'll offer that up again after we hear from the public. So at this point in time, if there's no other comments that council wants to put in, then I will open up the public portion of this, or the opening it up for public comment. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, I have a list of everybody that registered, and I can see who's here and attending. And so I'm just going to be going down the list, and I will be asking you if you've got any comment to make. And when I say your name, you will be unmuted and you will be allowed to speak. So the first person on my list is Paul Wilson. So have to get him unmuted.
Lisa, are you able to unmute him? I can't seem to do it.
Oh, there he goes.
There we go. Okay.
Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for participating in this public process. Is there comment that you wanted to offer up?
No, I agree with everything that council has said tonight. I think fire department is an important thing that we can provide what we need to for this project. And of course, parking. Because of the amount of units and the amount of stalls, I think that's something important to address. Especially because I am a next door neighbor to this project. You know, I'd like to see that, you know, this is something that's handled accordingly, of course. Okay. But no, other than that, I think everything that you guys have said tonight is pretty fair and pretty good.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wilson. We'll take you off mute now. And the next one I've got is Ricky, and I know I'm going to pronounce your name wrong. Starzyska, is that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, it's loaded.
Okay, So go ahead, Ricky.
Thank you. I do apologize. I have written something out, so
No.
please bear with me.
Yep.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor and Council. Thank you for letting me speak here today. First, I want to begin by saying that I love this town. I'm personally a new resident to Lucan. My partner, who has lived here since childhood, absolutely loves his hometown. Like many new residents in town coming from all over, Lucan is now home. It is a place we are proud of, and the small town that drew us here was more than just a comfortable cost of living, but the community that bands together. We hold doors for one another, know the staff at the grocery store, get to know the staff at the post office and at Clark's, and in turn, some of them even know us by name. I cherish the things that make our community amazing. Lucan has felt like home before it ever officially was. I am before you here today to address the development of our town. I am in no way against progress, and with this responsible urban planning, growing Lucan could give many more people the opportunity to work and invest their lives here, as I have been so lucky to do. With that said, I implore the township and council to set a standard for where we see it in 10 years. How will Lucan ultimately look? Will we continue building high-density housing in towns throughout Canada?
Uh-oh. Okay, I think we're losing you.
Expectation of what we want the landscape of our town to look like, both commercially and residentially, and that we are not going to become a haven for tall metropolitan structures. Taller buildings come with a host of issues, including an imbalanced load on municipal services such as water supply, sewage, electricity, and so on. By not permitting a height increase on new construction projects, I believe we can mitigate this issue and prevent setting a new precedent for future developers to build larger and larger high-density structures. With regards to the additional 2 stories proposed by the owner of the condos to be built on Main Street, there are 3 main points that require serious consideration. They are Wilberforce Public School, town infrastructure, which includes emergency services, of course, retail space, green space, and town population density, as well as affordable housing commitments from builders. A major consideration is the need to increase the occupancy size at Wilberforce Public School. I hear time and again how our school is overflowing with students. People move to subdivisions like Ridge Crossing in order to have easy access for their young ones to get to school. It is absolutely critical that we do not ignore the need for local children to go to school in town. I ask council to have a formal plan with the school board on how we can ensure that the projected population here will have a place to send their children to school in town. We are bursting at the seams with no active plan to expand, from my understanding. We are doing wrong by residents, teachers, and our little scholars alike. Growing the condo is not a viable option with our current situation, and therefore should not be approved. My next point is the need for upgrades in our town's infrastructure. With the growth of Lucan comes the need for increased retail, of course. Are our current municipal services and facilities equipped for the imminent growth of our population at the pace that it is growing now? When addressing population density, limiting the height of apartment buildings in the township has proven to be successful in not outpacing the affordability of updating much needed city planning, such as building roads, traffic stops, city lights, roundabouts, public parks, and green spaces, etc. With regards to the parking, 1.2 spots amendment. In a 2-bedroom unit, this prevents families, which the builder states are what they are wanting to attract, from having enough parking space and accessibility for 2 vehicles. Majority of families, especially in a town like Lucan without public transit, the parking amendment is working against the target market you wish to attract. To my peers who are assuming this will provide an option for affordable real estate or rent, be it in rental or ownership dwelling, I worry I might have to burst your bubble. I cannot imagine the owner of this structure would be designing rooftop patios and submit this beautiful, thought out proposal if they did not see lucrative potential in the investment. The market potential of this kind of building is very enticing. Just a few years ago, the units on Butler were proposed as affordable housing, then senior only, and finally became available on the market for rates, some as close, if not over $300,000. The inflated rental market has continued to increase over the past few years, and Lucan has become a more desirable town and a rising star amongst London's bedroom communities. There were people who purchased on Butler unit as an investment property to rent out, and those rentals are not for $1,000 or less. These units will most likely will not only be expensive, but will increase the property values of detached single-family homes. Why would a prospective buyer purchase a $300,000 condo in single-family homes when a three-bedroom with a backyard could cost $300,000, even if it needs updates? While this is great for homeowners looking to sell, it will further hinder first-time home buyers as costs continue to creep out of reach. Will most likely also increase property tax. By building high density condos and permitting the owners to further line their pockets with benefits secured from ever inflating cost of rent, we are not helping Lucanites or future homeowners. Agreeing to increase the size and number of units is not to our benefit, but to the benefit of the building owners, for the good of the town and its community. I ask that you consider before deciding to permit, and in fact set a precedence for this kind of development. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Ricky. I just wanted to clarify, because in listening to you, I get the impression that you think that this application is part of the same development that is directly behind and beside the township building. And I just wanted to let you know that it's not. It is on the other side of the township building, and it has nothing to do with the development that is in existence behind the township building. So this is a new one, and it would incorporate the building where the property where the building that houses Dr. Vigera and the massage therapist and all of that, and then it's property behind that.
Sorry, I was under the impression this is the one across from Lucan Architectural.
It's property across from Lucan Architectural, but it is not in any way related to what's already built here or the next two buildings that are part of that development.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I still maintain what I said, of course. No, I think there was a lot of confusion recently amongst a lot of residents, especially of course on our social media pages in regards to the location. I know we do have a number of high density residential coming up, which again, progress is not a bad thing. But these points stand in regards to setting precedents for future.
No, I understand. I just wanted to make sure, clarify that you were clear on what property we were talking about. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you
very much. Okay, so my next, the next speaker we have is Tom Tapia. And unfortunately, he had some issues connecting and registering. So I've got him on the phone and I've got him on speaker. And I hope that you can hear him when he presents. So Tom, I'm going to put you up to the mic on my laptop and you can go ahead, okay?
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Can everybody hear him? Yeah, I'm getting nods of heads. So good.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I'm a resident at 285 Walnut Street, which is almost directly behind, I guess it's 280 Main Street, which is a development site. I just wanted to make a few comments. Firstly, I guess from a personal standpoint, I know that when I built my home here in Walnut Grove, I had the luxury of choosing what lots that I wanted to build my home. So I chose this site mainly for privacy reasons, and not having any development behind me. At the time, there was a school and, of course, the doctor's offices, the subject site, and also the TD Bank. So I guess I have a little bit of a concern with the height of the building. I'm not, I'd say, opposed to, apartment building of, maybe 3 stories in height, but I think that a 6-story apartment building is, I guess doesn't fit within the community, and also the size of the building, with 114 units, you could possibly have, double that, 228 residents. I'm not sure how that's going to impact our community. I know that, at the west end of town, at the sign, it says Lucan population 1900. So, we could be potentially seeing, at least a 10% increase in our population base here. So, how's that going to, affect our community? I also wanted to bring up the point, and probably most people on council and some of the people that are viewing this tonight, if you remember back in 2014, we went through the same process for 270 Main Street, which is, now the library and municipal offices. And, at that time, some of the residents actually appealed the decision by council to the Ontario Municipal Board. And the board did decide at that time to reduce the height of those buildings to 3 stories. And I think, in the decision, the official plan addresses the scale, density, and form of residential development. It states that new residential development shall respect and be sensitive to the small town character of the village. So, I know that, watching that, transpire, I guess 6 years ago, was very concerning to me. And just a few other things. I'm a little bit concerned about the potential for tax implications, with all the development that's taking place in Lucan. I would hope that the developers bear any costs, associated with servicing the site, whether we need enhanced police and fire protection, whether there's sewage treatment capacity, and also, whether other speakers was, I don't have school-age children, but I know that that's a big concern. And then also, the impact of soft services, such as, our arena and pool, that could have an impact on that. So anyways, so it's that in short, pretty much sums up my comments. But I think that, I think the main thing for me is just the height of the building. It just doesn't fit in, with the community. So anyways, thank you very much, Madam Mayor and Council.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Tom. Thanks. Bye. Bye-bye. Okay, next on my list is Gord Morsink. There he goes. Okay, Mr. Morsink.
Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you. Yep.
Perfect. Madam Mayor, Deputy Mayor, members of council, I had submitted a letter previously, earlier this week, outlining some of my concerns. As more and more information kind of came through, and with a little research, I have modified it slightly, and I think it's probably easiest if I just read out what I have.
Sure.
If you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Basically, I just like to address numerous concerns, both as a resident of Lucan and as a property owner that lives within 120 meters of the subject property. First, as a resident, I have deep concerns with how a project of this magnitude will affect the small town character that people here are accustomed to, and one of the reasons they move here for. The Middlesex official plan does support intensification, but to what extent is considered appropriate? Now, the plan doesn't specify a limit on density. It's simply controlled through the the bylaws. However, if you look at some surrounding municipalities, they do prescribe some limits. Just as an example, Strathroy-Caradoc, which is a significantly larger town than Lucan, does prescribe a maximum of 47 to 76 residential units per hectare. This proposed development is planning 114 units plus 2 commercial spaces in less than a hectare. That's a bit more than excessive. But after reading the planning justification report that was submitted by the developer, it's in their opinion and after their own interpretation of the official plan and bylaws that this proposal is appropriate for Lucan. One of my questions is, do they actually live here? So the report kind of skimmed over one of the most important parts of the official plan, and that is that growth shall be achieved without disruption to the existing nature and character of the township, and that to ensure compatibility, the density and height of new residential development will be limited. It's kind of opposite to what Mr. Nifton, I believe, stated. It doesn't blend in and it will most certainly stand out. And it is a high rise in respect to Lucan. Furthermore, bylaws do allow for minor variances, but a change in height from the allowed 10 meters for 3 stories all the way up to 25 meters is more than excessive and will tower over any other structure in this town. Building that still requires reducing setbacks by more than half, from 56 meters down to 22 meters, needs rooftop patios, and I'm assuming that's just to meet the green space requirements. And still after that needs a reduction in the number of parking spaces. And they also go on to suggest they may have to share parking between residents and commercial to have enough space. Makes it kind of obvious that the size and scope of this building is too large for the property and for Lucan. As was just stated as well, their intent is to maximize. None of these variances are minor, but all of them will and do go against the small town character that residents of Lucan are accustomed to. As a property owner, I have concerns with the increased levels of traffic, noise and light pollution, and shadowing from the building. The amount and speed of traffic at the north end of town is already problematic, mainly for pedestrians trying to cross at the arena, even with the new lights, and residents that are turning out of Chestnut Street onto Main Street. Has a traffic study been completed with the effects of another 150 plus minimum resident vehicles that will be added daily? The renderings show rooftop patios on the 5th and 6th floor levels. The noise and light pollution from those levels will project well into neighboring homes and buildings and will reduce the peace and privacy of those residents. A shadowing study is a bit of a concern as well. The study only takes a small sampling throughout the year, but still shows homes in Walnut Grove subdivision, which is 2 streets over, and the future neighboring condos as well, and the adjacent businesses to be effective. They're not single day events, but will be affected on those properties for the majority of the winter months. Maintaining the essential qualities of privacy, quiet enjoyment, public health and safety, and land use compatibility are listed as goals and objectives in the official plan. This proposed building satisfies none, but detracts from all of those. Of other concern is what comes next. One proposal in town already, the Old Clover Apartments, has already gone from 3 stories to 4. Now they're asking for 5. If 5 gets approved, then 6 isn't such a stretch anymore. But where does it stop? We understand that growth is inevitable and someday 5 or 6 story buildings will happen. But going from 3 to 6 stories overnight is a big change. The small town character will be gone just as quickly. 2 of the 3 condo buildings behind the municipal office, that project, are yet to be built. They were restricted to 3 stories from the requested 4 after the OMB hearing. If the project at 280 Main Street gets approved, what is to stop that developer from requesting a bylaw amendment for more stories? What grounds would council have to deny it? And how would they hold up in an OMB hearing? Just to finish off, there's no doubt that Lucan is growing and in need of affordable housing, specifically in the form of apartments. This can still be accomplished while following the official plan and maintaining the existing nature and character of the town. The developers submitted a proposal, which in my opinion is in complete disregard of the official plan and its bylaws. It appears to be a case of throw mud at the wall and see what sticks. It's up to council to consider what type of growth and what amount of intensification is appropriate for Lucan as per the official plan, while maintaining the character of this town and not giving into overdevelopment. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for that, Mr. Morsink. Okay, the next one on my list is Tara Clisht. Tara, is there a comment that you would like to add?
Sure, I'll try to keep it brief. So just wanted to register my opposition to the changes to the bylaws for the to accommodate the additional height on the building, as well as reducing the parking requirement. It's not in the best interest for the residents, and it's not appropriate for Lucan. I'd be really concerned about where the parking overflow would go. I mean, people are going to have visitors. People are going to say they have one car for the unit, but they're not going to have one car. I'm also concerned about the infrastructure for the increased traffic with 300 residents or more coming and going. There's no turning lane. It seems like it's going to be a bit of a mess around there. And I just think that the proposed changes, in addition to exceeding the zoning bylaws, etc., they're not in keeping with the municipality's official plan or the character of the town of Lucan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Oh, excuse me. Okay, Lisa, I've got Leon Cormier next. Leon, is there anything that you wanted to add as a part of public comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. In the interest of time, I'd just like to echo basically all of the concerns that have already been put forward, highlighting a few. I'm at 277 Walnut Street, also affected by visibility of the height of the structure, also affected by the shadowing. I guess currently, I'll echo the fact that I also believe in economic development and building a better community. Having moved here approximately 7 years ago from the Maritimes, where my wife and I are very, very interested in Lucan being this small town atmosphere, and I think it's a beautiful town. We're proud to call it home after 7 years. But quite honestly, I think it's very flagrantly obvious that this is a massive, overwhelming structure that's going to be built in my backyard. It's very obviously going to be intrusive right into my backyard. It's going to have a negative effect on my enjoyment of my property. Absolutely. For sure, the 3-story condo buildings on Butler Street, as I sit here in my backyard now, I can see them through the trees, but it doesn't affect my enjoyment. When I'm up on my 2nd story, when I'm in my bedroom, believe me, the first thing I do when I turn the light on is close the curtains, because everybody in the top floor of that building can see into my bedroom. That's a 3-story building. So to echo my concerns of something that's going to be potentially 25 meters high, I don't think I need to expand upon that. Even the largest mature trees in the backyard don't cover the 3-story condo building, and I'm very appreciative that that didn't turn into a 4-story building. So, and I guess all I can echo, highlighting the height is already one I touched on. Parking on Main Street, I've never officially complained about this before, but I certainly feel it's already dangerous pulling out of Chestnut Street onto Main Street. And I would echo other councillor concerns and other public concerns that I think we're being naive if we think that there's only going to be 114 parking spots, or sorry, 114 vehicles, or 146, or I think we all know that they're going to be lined up and down every possible street, in my opinion. And in closing, I guess all I can ask is, this is potentially going to be built in my backyard, so I would ask all the stakeholders to consider, would you like this in your backyard? And myself, as being a member of this community, if it was being in somebody else's backyard, would I be concerned? I guess my answer to that is I should be, if I want to be a valued member of this community, and I should care about the community, and I do care about the community. So I'd ask that Madam Mayor and councillors make this decision based on not negatively affecting the residents in this area, and continue to do a good job focused on positive growth, but once again, having that overarching theme of a good community, a prosperous community, but to keep this small town charm that we have. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Cormier. I've got Charles and Lisa Ansoms next. I don't know. I guess maybe Lisa, are you going to be the one speaking?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, certainly our concerns have already been voiced in, so we don't need to repeat everything. I guess our question would be, really, is there a need? As we already have an apartment building across the street from us. We are at the end of Butler Street, and it was difficult to fill. And as was mentioned, changes had to be made to those plans. And we're still dealing with an eyesore across the street as we wait for the 2 other buildings to be built. So like those are already in the plan. So we question whether there is a need for such an excessive apartment building to be built. We still have safety and landscaping issues on the boulevard across the street from us that haven't been dealt with in over a year. So we are a little skeptical about further developments actually in our neighborhood. It was mentioned, Mr. Fitzgerald mentioned that, Lucan wants affordable housing. So our question is, are these proposed units going to be affordable? As I mentioned, the plans changed across the street to try and fill those units. And Mr. Little mentioned about the sewer, having access to it on Butler Street. And we're just wondering exactly how that connects, because does that mean digging up our road? Does that mean going through the farmer's field? So those are some of our concerns and questions, without repeating everything that's already been nicely put forward.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Mrs. Ansoms. Who do I have next? Anne Marie Parkin. And Ms. Parkin, do you have a comment you'd like to make?
I do. Thank you, Madam Mayor and councillors. I made some notes, as several other people did, so I apologize for any repetition. But 10 years ago, we moved to Lucan with full awareness that it was growing, with the intent to raise our children here, which we are doing, and eventually to retire here. So while we're transplants, we are Lucanites at heart. Basically, I work in London and I live in Lucan. I have concerns very similar to those stated, not only tonight, but at the June 16th meeting with regards to the other building, because my concerns are community-based rather than the building itself. And unfortunately, my concerns apply to both. For example, high rises in a low rise small town, giving Lucan laced with London sort of skyline, which is not in concert with the local communities in our area like St. Mary's, Ilderton, Exeter, and Park Hill. As a resident, these are not small or medium rise buildings in the context of Lucan. From my perspective, Lucan as a town doesn't suit the proposal, especially for 280 Main Street. But I also have a concern about the one on Old Clover. And unfortunately, I was not aware of the June 16th meeting in time to speak on that. COVID-19 has made communication difficult, and I realize that.
Okay, can I just interrupt for 1 second? So if you could keep your comments to 280 Main, and then I would encourage you, we're still taking comments about the other development. You could submit them in writing up until tomorrow.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I am actually working on an email for that, and I have spoken with Tina earlier today.
Okay.
So while I actually prefer the 280 Main Street building itself on the sketches and the location to the Southern Old Clover building, I feel, and I do believe we absolutely need rental units in town, and the continued growth in Lucan is necessary, but it should be added at a healthy growth rate and managed by our council so that residents, the infrastructure, and emergency services all have time to adapt as needed to this growth. I don't understand where the pressure for this speed of growth is suddenly coming from. And I also don't understand how it benefits Lucanites as well as this particular developer and potentially Exeter's economy. My 4 primary questions to council, though, are specifically regarding emergency services. And this would apply to both buildings. Again, sorry. And full disclosure, I work in EMS. So this is near and dear to my heart. Firstly, our EMS, fire department, and police department keeping pace with Lucan's current growth rate, because Lucan is thriving. And I have concerns in that regard and have had for some time, and would appreciate input from those services and council in reassuring residents that we are safe here. And can those services continue to handle surges in numbers that these apartment buildings bring into play as that happens? Specifically with Lucan Fire Department, are they staffed, trained, and equipped to respond successfully to emergencies in 5, 6, or 8-story buildings? I personally don't feel comfortable comparing London Fire and Lucan's volunteer fire department because it's outside of my scope. But I do have concerns that while London may be dealing with high-rise buildings on a regular basis, Lucan, it's a learning curve, and I don't know if they have what they need to do that well, and they deserve that. Facebook discussions have been ongoing on this regard, and they are suggesting that Lucan would require ladder assistance from Exeter, which is a Huron County response to a Middlesex County need. I have also a time response concern from Exeter, assuming the ladder is available at the time of a Lucan need, understanding especially that Highway 4 between Lucan and Exeter is frequently closed and often for extended periods of time in the winter time, which from an EMS perspective causes us problems all the time. And I'm also concerned that our ambulance base is often empty, and we are dealing with a volunteer fire department, and Lucan is thriving. So at what point are we reassessing the number of emergency services available per resident? And once those emergency services do eventually have to be upgraded, because that will come at some point, which is outside of my pay grade, what is the impact of that upgrading of emergency services in terms of any impact on municipal taxes? That's the entirety of my comments at this time, and thank you for your time.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Ms. Parkin. Okay, I think that's all I have from a public participation standpoint. Lisa, is that what you've got on your list? And Tina, did I hit everybody? I just want to make sure that I didn't miss anybody. Okay, good. So after those public comments, I will turn it back to council. So for some further comment, discussion, looking for clarification on anything. Any comments from council? Deputy Mayor.
I'm not sure if now's the time to say this or not, but I guess I want to, I think it's important for the people on the line and on YouTube and for the developer and really who want to invest in our community to, I guess, hear, after I've, heard from the public and looking at the comments and that, and I guess I want, I think people need to know where I kind of sit on this, until there's further debate from our council, but certainly, for me, it's parking. I agree with Madam Mayor that I've got no objection to the commercial site. They're changing a Dr. Locke's office to residential or to the density. But my concern is height, parking. I think it's a great location for 3 or potentially 4-story, that 12-meter, 10-meter high buildings there. I think it'd be a great place to invest in our community. I think a commercial, we need rental properties. We need some form of commercial, and I think it's great that someone's willing to potentially invest in our community. But I just think if they can satisfy some of our community needs, I think it'd be a great project. So,
Any other comments from council at this time? Councillor Mastarakis.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have to be responsible and respectful in the process as we're going through here. I've heard some great comments. What I would enjoy from the ones that read statements, they had some good foundational points for our community that we can take back to our, if we're having future strategy sessions or comments, if they could share those points and concerns so we can review them as we go forward and look at some of the comments so we can respond and take action and address if necessary. So I really do appreciate the commentary we're getting back. I appreciate all the work the developers have done, and I agree the look is exceptional of the building. But I do go back, we've got an official plan. What is our vision for the community? And how does this fit within that in that plan? Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, Peter. Get to Councillor Reagan just before. I just want to, I know I didn't mention this before, but of course, the recommendation from the planner is just to accept this. So I think, well, I'm fairly confident we will not be making a decision on this tonight. So to Councillor Mastarakis's point, anybody that read anything, if you could submit that, that would be great, because at the end of the meeting, I will be saying that we will be able to take some written submissions. But the points that were made, certainly to what Councillor Mastarakis said, would probably be helpful in discussions amongst us. Okay, Councillor Reagan.
I want to just echo some of the same things that the deputy mayor said. But one of the things that was very clear tonight is that we have an amazing culture in this community. We have a lot of people who are very passionate, and people that are willing to come on and make statements, and a lot of well-founded statements, like Councillor Mastarakis has said. There's a lot of good information that we had. So again, that makes me very proud to be a Lucanite, because people are involved, and that's why I got involved. But I do echo some of the concerns that the deputy mayor has said about parking, about height. Access is a big thing for me as well. That's something that the traffic, I know all these studies would become becoming soon, but again, my main point, however, is the fact that we've got a lot of good people in the community that really care, and I just think we should thank everybody for their letters, their comments, and everybody that we've spoken to over the last couple of weeks on the street. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you for that, Councillor Reagan. Any other comments? I guess my question is, I'm not to go back to the application that we discussed last week, but if there were things that we wanted to be, is there a way to hold any of this, Dan, I guess making it through site-specific decisions, so that what we see is what we're getting? I guess, number one, would there be an appetite from that with the developer? And two, what would the process be for that? So that to the point that, if it's 25 meters and we're looking at 6 stories, but if for some reason the property got flipped tomorrow or got flipped, that can actually be a higher building than 6 stories. It's in the way that this rendering looks, that's what we've got. Is there a way to put holdings on the property to hold the developer to certain conditions?
Through the chair, so yes, there are mechanisms that you can place holding provisions on the property. One would be for a holding provision for a public site plan, which would not necessarily hold the developer to what's shown here, but would at least provide council with the authority to see the proposal again once before final approval. However, with that said, there's no guarantees through that site plan public process. Site plan inherently is not a public process. It's just the implementation of the zoning on the site. So if there was concern with regards to what the developer is proposing on the property, the way to really lock that in, as discussed on the previous application, would be through those site-specific zoning provisions for things such as height, stories, setbacks. Parking obviously is one that they've already asked for, but that would be the way to do it. I don't know if the applicant or Harry, the agent, wants to speak to that further.
I don't know, did Harry or Mr. Nifton, did either one of you wanted to add anything to that question that I had? Whether you'd be open to that?
Yes, Madam Mayor, actually, I wanted to speak to another issue. I mean, we've obviously been listening very intently on the comments that have been received. We thank everyone for providing their comments. Obviously, there's a lot of passion for this community and a lot of interest in how this community will grow. We have been sort of communicating back and forth with my client on the comments we've been receiving tonight. And the one thing we want to consider is to go back and revisit this and maybe go back with a lower height that will accommodate some of these concerns that we've been hearing and try to achieve the parking that is required by the bylaw. There is some urgency to get this project moving. So we want to make sure that it's a project that the council and the community will embrace. My question to you is if we're going to go back and revisit this to come back with a project that is somewhat lower in height and addresses the parking concerns and some of the other issues we heard, you have a zoning amendment that's proposed that addresses 3 issues, that being the setback of the residential, the height, and the parking. If we don't change anything else in the bylaw and we actually serve to reduce the request in terms of the height and the parking, procedurally, does that require further notice, or can we make that switch before it comes to you for consideration of the zoning amendment?
I will get Dan to answer that one.
Through the chair of the applicant, technically speaking, it would depend on the level of change perceived in the application and wanting to open that up for further public comment. Generally speaking, if you're making something more compliant, then it might not be necessary or deemed necessary to go back to receive additional public comment. However, with that said, it's kind of, it will depend on what exactly comes back as a proposal and changes as to whether or not staff feel that they should host another public meeting to hear from the public on what you're proposing.
Thank you, Dan. And through you, Madam Mayor, the intent obviously would be to not add to the request, but to reduce the request. So being that we're the ones that want to move things forward, we're not going to be asking for something that would put us in a position to require further public consultation. We obviously want to keep this process moving. We've heard the comments. We want to be able to address those comments further, but we have to have some time now to go back and see how that will affect the concept plan, what that means to the overall density, the parking, and the look of the building, because now we're not sure based on what we're hearing. If we go lower, the design will obviously have to change as well. So that's something we need to look at as well. So I guess maybe to answer the first question, I mean, we hope that if we come back with a proposal that is more in line with addressing the comments we've heard tonight, that hopefully that will also not necessarily need to have to go through public site plan approval, because that just gives further delay to the timelines in terms of getting this project off the ground.
Okay, so maybe with that sort of consideration, I think that probably all of that probably warrants an offline discussion between you and the planner, I would think, in days to come. Because obviously that's not going to be solved tonight. Okay, no, appreciate that input. That is very much appreciative. I think, you know, certainly for me, like, the attractiveness of this building is the mixed use and having that commercial or office space on the first floor. Understanding that if you bring it down, you know, that might be lost. I don't know what that would do to your business plan, but I think there's no secret that that is one thing that we certainly lack in our community, is that extra office space or commercial front. So, you know, certainly supportive of that mixed use for sure. A number of comments were brought up. Or I'm sorry, Harry, is there anything else that you wanted to add before I jumped off onto something else?
No, Madam Chair, just to answer to that last question, I mean, the intent would be to still maintain a component of commercial on the property because that is required by the designation in order to maintain its mixed use.
Right. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. That's why I'm not a planner. I can't keep all that stuff straight. a number of comments were brought up with regards to the amount of traffic coming out onto Highway 4. And I guess I don't know if I'm looking at Dan or even Jeff. You know, has there ever been a I mean, I know MTO does traffic studies all the time. And I know they've done a number of them in our community for the other end of town. But just wondering, again, and I know it was brought up about the turning lane, but can you just refresh my memory on how that would work? I guess whoever, Jeff or Dan.
Yes, Madam Mayor. So there is, not to get too complicated, as it stands now, there is a double lane coming out, leaving Lucan. Really, the turning lane would be coming into Lucan, whether the need would be to put something there. That would require a fairly in-depth study, because we'd have to study time of day traffic coming through on an hourly basis during rush hour and that sort of thing. So there would have to be some consideration there. At this point, and I throw it to Dan, but at this point, we know that could be addressed, so that if this project did want to move forward, we would look into that and just see what needed to go there. But we know now that something could be arranged if needed to do that. So if I'm not correct, Dan, if that's the way I'm looking at it, is that if approval was given, then we would look at a traffic study to see if their turning lane had to be added in there.
Through the chair to the mayor, that is correct. And it could be a situation. I know Mr. Furcio said he doesn't want to add any holding provisions to the property or slow down the project anymore. But council could consider, if there was a substantial concern about that, a holding provision specifically requiring that traffic study to show favorable outcomes, that the traffic would not be impacted as a result of the development.
Okay.
But with that said, through standard site plan process, that's something that we would be looking at anyways to ensure that there was no negative impact in the existing right of way. And that's something that MTO, even though they don't have jurisdiction over this particular stretch of land, they're going to be looking for that as well.
For sure, for sure. Okay, thanks for that, Dan. Jeff, I think this question would be for you. The Ansems brought up the connection point through Butler, and just wondering how that would be managed for this piece of property.
So there is an existing sanitary line that does run out Butler that actually that goes to 280 and 290 Main Street. So there is a set precedent there for the sewer line to go out Butler. So if this development were to continue, there would be, that's where the continued precedent would be set. It would be an easement. And part of that easement would be to continue to service 290, which is the westerly property, to 280. And we've already made comments about that easement would be in place. But I think the one thing to keep in mind, yes, the street doesn't go any further than where it is now, but there is actually technically a sanitary already to 280 off Butler.
Okay, all right, thank you for that. Okay, are there any other comments from council at this point? Maybe I'll give the applicant one last chance to say anything before we reconvene our regular meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. As I said, I mean, we appreciate all the comments that we received tonight. We take those seriously, and we'll go back now to see what changes can be made to make this a more appealing project for the community. And we hope to be back with that shortly. And again, just thanks to everyone for their comments this evening.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that. And thanks for your input and everything that you offered up tonight. So with that, if there's no more comments from council, and just before we reconvene to our regular council meeting, I will just remind the members of public the public that we will not be making a decision tonight, and that I talked this over with Mr. Fitzgerald, that we will extend, much like we did with the application we discussed last week, receiving submissions until next Friday, which is July the 3rd. So if there is any more public comment that wants to be made, and if you want to submit something more formally, please do that, and you can email it to planning@lucanbidolph.on.ca, and we'll receive those until July the 3rd. With that, if I can get a mover and seconder to adjourn our public meeting at 7:56 and reconvene our regular meeting. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. And all opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Okay, where's my agenda? Okay, so no communications, I don't think. And our motions are that resolved that the Council of the Township of Lucan-Bidolph receives the planner's report number PL-07-2020 as information. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor Regan and Councillor Westman. All opposed? And that's carried. I guess I should also add all these things in my notes that I'm remembering, is that this will serve, that this did serve as the public meeting for this property. The plan, I think, from Mr. Fitzgerald's standpoint is to bring a recommendation back to council at our next council meeting, which will be July 14th. And at that, yep, Dan, before I go any further.
I just wanted to point out that if the, based on the comments that we've heard from the applicant and agent, it looks like they might be going back to consider a redesign of the property. So we'd want to make sure that we have enough time in between what they're providing us to effectively provide analysis back to council and recommendation. We probably have to push that off to a later date.
Okay, yeah, and that's fair enough. But as it stands tonight, as of now, this would be the only public forum. And then I guess, depending on what comes back, but to the discussion that we had, that seemed to go, in all likelihood, this will be it for the public participation. So again, if you want to submit something, please get that in for next Friday, and continue to watch social media and the website for when it will be brought forward at council meeting, because there'll be no more notification. And I'm looking for a nod of the head from Dan on that. Great. Okay. With that, resolved that if no one cares to speak to these bylaws on their first, second, and third reading, that they be considered to have been read a first time and passed, read a second time and passed, read a third time and passed, and that they be numbered 29-2020, the confirming bylaw. Can I get a mover and seconder for that, please? Councillor or Deputy Mayor Manders and Councillor Regan. All opposed? And that's carried. And resolved that the council meeting be adjourned at 7:59. A mover and seconder for that, please. Councillor Westman and Deputy Mayor Manders. All opposed? And that's carried. Thank you very much.